joke, you can kill an emotional moment. And so it's a bit about authenticity and getting your ego out of the way. You don't need that extra beat or that extra like shot or that extra 5 seconds in the shot. It's like, oh my gosh, we got it that first time. And brevity is the soul of wit, but it's the soul of so much else in the art. So timing is everything.
I will add irrelevance. If something is not relevant to the story, even if it's a detail that you really love that you want to add, maybe cut it out. So again, it kind of dovetails off of the brevity is the soul of wit. Irrelevance makes for a really bad story. I mean, if we were up here and it was pitch perfect and then we just decided to pitch our stories to you, I don't think that's really relevant to what the actual discussion was supposed to be about. So that would have created a really bad panel. So relevance is, to me, what also can create a bad story.
But I also think to fix that, listening is also good. When I send out my pitch and I'm like, nobody has my idea, I go, something's wrong. And I'm like, okay, let me revise what I wrote. And if I'm not revising what I wrote, I have a few reporters that I'm close to, so I would email them and say, hey, what's wrong with this? So they will tell me, well, you know, you're not selling anything, there's no hook. And I'm like, what do you mean? So then I have to go back and look and do my more research and kind of tailor or revise the pitch that I wrote to speak to them. It's about knowing your audience.
And if you don't have the opportunity for feedback in that way, so if you're writing a novel or if you're writing a screenplay and you don't have a lot of people who are giving you direct feedback in that way, again, it's still good to, if it's really not hitting, it's not resonating with you, then doing your own research, trying to gain different perspectives so that you can be flexible, that's another way for you to do it, so that you can take Mona's idea of, fixing something and tweaking it, and do it for yourself. So don't wait all the time for feedback. Sometimes you can feel that something is not right with your story, and that would necessitate a change in perspective.
What I do is I look at other stories about, let's say I'm talking about a breakup. Then I look at how other people have talked about it and what was resonating, like you're saying, to the point that, okay, everybody's talking about this specific breakup. And so doing the research, I'm like, okay, yeah, those are the words they used, that's the angle that they went for, and I see who else is doing that, and I steal the idea, kind of, I get inspired, and use it for, the story that I'm trying to actually tell. So,
I read stuff out loud to myself. This is a really easy way to say, well, that sounded like crap, because when you read things, you self-correct. So you know what you meant, and then you add words that weren't there or take away words that, So if you read it to yourself out loud, suddenly you're hearing it in a different way, and all of a sudden you realize, well, that totally didn't need to be there, and this needed to be way over there. So it helps you with editing for sure.
Oh yeah, it's the best way to prove. Absolutely.
This is a very good natural segue into getting into the next category of questions, which is on the storyteller. And we'll start with, what are the top 3 skills and talents you think a person needs to tell a great story?
I know I'm being repetitive with the empathy thing, but I think that has to be there to be able to be authentic and to be able to relate. Humility, I think, is a big part of things, because then you get the ego out of the way. And then bravery. You have to be vulnerable. If you're going to be authentic, you have to be vulnerable. And I know that it sounds like very vague descriptions, but that bravery is everything, so much to the point where I've had to write that at the beginning of the day on my to-do list, rise to the challenge. Every day, I did go to law school, be glad you didn't do it. And it's wonderful if anyone is considered being determined.
Really selling.
Yeah. I don't do it anymore. No, I do use my law degree to produce. I just don't traditionally practice anymore. But I would rise to the challenge, because it's one of those things you can, it's easy to say that right now, oh, be brave. And you're thinking, oh yeah, of course, be brave. But then actually doing it on a daily basis, to be mindful of it, I would write that down. You're going to be brave today. You're going to be humble. And it helps. It really resonates if it's a constant reminder. And then I can kind of calm down a little bit, and I'm not as scared of the failure, because that's the other thing. Just getting rid of that. You're going to be scared of failure, and you just have to kind of accept that. Like, walk with it next to you, but keep going anyway.
I would add passion to you. I think, you know, you need to be passionate about what you're doing. And whenever, again, you're telling a story, it's really believing in what you're telling or writing. And then we also add creative and always keeping your mind open and being curious about things, because I think it does help. And you know, you're telling, you want to tell your story. And for me, it's, you know how to write English.
So it's not necessarily
Whatever language you
Whatever it is.
Just master it. Be good at the writing.
Yeah.
Robyn?
So I'm gonna give you like hippie answer, which is love. Yeah, well, you actually do, you need to love what you're doing. You need to love the subject that you're talking about, even if it's something really corporate, you know, like, I mean, I did corporate for a while, but I was really good at it. So, but you still have to be, it goes to that passion that you know, it's that the thing. I have to really love the thing that I'm talking about so then I can do a really great job of telling that story. And then, excuse me, observation. You need to be extraordinarily observant of things, you know? Especially if you're here and you're telling a story, you're doing a thing, you're feeling really good about it, and people are like, clearly your story's not landing at that point, you know, so you gotta move on. But I didn't really have a third because they already started saying things. But yeah, I have to now. No, don't sweat.
Kidding, Carol.
Yeah,
We're two.
a lot of them were covered, so I'm gonna say a willingness to increase your skill set, increase your training. And I don't mean go to school necessarily. I don't at all. But I do mean that I have run into people in circumstances where they just create out of, by knocking about in their own head, which is great. But sometimes you do need, hey, I actually need to learn the structure of this. I need to go find the community who lives this. Let me talk to them. Let me be in their shoes for an extended period of time. Maybe I need to do some diversity training before I write. Maybe I need to do a whole bunch of things and drills and skills. So even if it's not in a formal school setting, there is still the mentality of a rigorous training to embody this craft. So the willingness, which has to do with ego, to be like, you know what, I might not have all the tools, I might have all the people, the information that I need, so let me go and find it and then train in it. And not be afraid to do the big rewrites. If you have floated your story and it's not resonating with that community, maybe you've written a character and they're like, yo, this is not actually realistic, don't be afraid to do the big rewrites, you know what I mean, and see where that takes you. And even if it's late in the game, I know that's really scary, but the story could then be an American classic and not just, hey, this is a classic in my own mind. It could be for everyone, for all eternity. If you do that extra like late hour, 11th hour work.
Yeah, that's the best thing I think I've heard. That's so true because it never stops. Like, you could be in the industry for 30 years, 40 years, that you have to always be willing to go that extra step to learn. It's brilliant advice. That's that. Listen to her.
It's the expression of writer. That's it.
That's true.
Keep writing.
Yes, very good. That I'll do my three from a Capricorn side.
Yeah.
Super Capricorn, very corporate, but then I would say determination, which kind of is just another simple way. Be determined in the thing that you're doing. If there's something that you want to write, don't let the famed or fabled writer's block stop you. Just be determined. And then also be disciplined. You have to be disciplined to be a storyteller. You have to be disciplined, especially if it's something that you're just doing for yourself. You still have to have some discipline in that. Otherwise, you're going to have something sit there for years and years and years, and you're going to be one of those people who just talks about something that I wrote one time and that didn't even really finish. Discipline is the thing that actually gets you there. So determination, discipline, and then patience. Because even if you have determination, even if you have the discipline, there are going to be times where nothing's hitting, nothing's inspiring you, or a lot of the rest of life and paying bills gets in the way. and you can get down on yourself saying, man, I really need to make more time, because, you know, people like to tell you, like, if there's no such thing as you being too busy, that's just meaning you don't prioritize. I think that's bullshit. Okay? People who say that don't have, like, they're not adults in my opinion. Like sometimes you literally are busy. That doesn't mean you should be like, just get down on yourself about the things that you don't happen to be able to be having the time to do, and just say, you know what, as soon as I can prioritize that thing, I'm gonna get back to it. It's nothing to do with like your worth, your worthiness, or even your creativity at that point. So be determined, be disciplined, and be patient. Absolutely.
I've written a whole one book. I've got 4 others I started. But one of the things that I have a writing coach that I talk to, and she said, just finish. She said, you can always rewrite the other parts, you can always edit it later, but like just finish the thing you started so that you can get to the end of it and then go back and go, okay, well this doesn't work, and oh, I need to add this in, and blah, blah, but if it's living in your head and not actually on paper, you can't actually know where you've gotten.
We call it with my students, because storytellers can get very perfectionist, but when somebody's like close to a deadline and they're not even really close to the deadline in terms of finishing, I'm like, done is better than done.
Yes.
Right. Done is better than done.
So you can fix it, but you can't fix it if it's not there.
And I agree with you on the whole bullshit thing about when people say that. Because the thing is, we do the things that we want to do. I mean, we take the time. So it's almost like when someone says, I don't have time to work out, you do. You're just not doing it. Like we brush our teeth every day because we have to. So I agree that discipline, get it on paper. You just have to get it on paper.
This is a really important one. And this is a yes or no question.
Okay.
I'm very interested to know the yes or no. And then we'll see what the deep dive is.
That wasn't on the list.
It is. It's on the list.
Just a yes or no question?
I don't remember a yes or no.
Can people be taught how to deal with criticism?
Yes.
Yes.
For sure. Well, I do
We have
that.
examples of it.
I mean,
All right. That's true. Let's all deep dive this. I think criticism is actually a very critical portion of storytelling, and I see so many young writers in my lifetime who just are really, really bad at it. And if you're ever going to mentor, if you're ever going to share anything with a young storyteller, or even an old one, you know, criticism is key. You cannot have one without the other. And I think it's really important to talk about what that means to us and how you can actually learn to deal with criticism in a proactive and in a helpful way. So we'll start with literally everybody talk about this is your chance.
I know, we're all like, we can't wait to tell you.
Yes.
It is the biggest opportunity you could ever have to receive that criticism. And it hurts and it feels not great, but it is absolutely a gift, an absolute gift. And putting up barriers from it, you're walking away from a great opportunity to learn something that maybe you couldn't possibly have known. My girlfriend is my writing partner, and I had some problems in the script with some beats, and she was able to solve it in a way that I never would have thought about. And in receiving the criticism, as much as it stings, you do get over it. And I think that's the one, okay, going back to law school, they do that, the Socratic method, you know, I don't know if you ever saw the paper chase, where like they'll just kind of go through everyone and just stare and be like, you, stand up, brief the case. And then they humiliate you. It's to kind of break you down a little bit. And then you sit down and you realize, oh God, I'm so
Right, I didn't
I
die.
did not hate it. And then later, when you know, you're breathing again, you're able to process what you learned. So I think as much as it stings, criticism is the best opportunity. It's like a free class. And then you can learn to deal with the content of it. I mean, you'll get good criticism that's worth it. And other times you can, you know, maybe dismiss some of the notes.
All right, so let's focus the answer on how you can teach somebody to deal with criticism. No, that's good. How?
For me, actually, that was the hard part, because I mean, when I worked for a PR agency and I started writing some of the pitches, which was kind of nice, I could go to my boss and then he would go over the text that I had written and tell me, okay, that's not good, this and that. But that was easier, actually, because he was right next to me, and I thought, okay, I'm just learning, I'm young. But then when I started my own company, that it's just me and the dog. So it's just Georgie and I working all day. And so I don't, my wife doesn't work from home, so it's just me and the dog. And so when I'm writing, it was actually very hard for me to be okay, to tell myself it's okay if you suck. Literally, I'm like, I suck. I'm such a loser. And I was so negative. I'm like, oh my God. But then I thought, okay, well, I can't be staying in that frame of mind all day long because I have clients who need results. So that's how I came up. Okay, I know some reporters, let alone I don't send them a pitch. Maybe they can give me some feedback. So when they were coming back to me and they would say, you know, this makes no sense actually, what you wrote. And so what was cool about it is that I was all by myself. So I could punch myself, you know, and then go, okay, are you done now? Now, okay, can you read and maybe accept this as positive and turn this into something productive? So it took me a minute, and still takes me a minute today to do that because I don't like rejection. I take this as rejection. I don't like it, but it is. If you turn this into, you change your perspective on things and turn this into a positive, then you can actually get to work and fix it. And learn at the same time now. When you tell me this sentence is way too long, it makes no sense, and I reread it and I go, yeah, no, but yeah, okay. So I can change it, you know. So that's my phrase.
If the answer come in, it's totally love again. It's
well, because I've had young people working with me and working for me, and the deal is you have to like kind of let them through it. You know, it's like, okay, you're amazing, but this is why you're here, okay? Because if you weren't, you wouldn't be here with me. So let's start with that, and then say, at the same time, you still have to learn stuff, okay? And so this is my responsibility as your boss, mentor, blah, blah, fill in the blank, whatever title you want to call me. It's my responsibility to make you better at what you're doing. So here's my chance. We're going to do it together. And we're going to do this, and I'm going to say, maybe not so much this, and maybe a little bit more of that. And I was thinking, and now go, and then we'll have lunch, and then come back, and we'll do it again. A lot of smiling, because it goes far, and being really professional at the same time, because giving criticism to someone about their work that is somehow couched in this thing that somehow makes them feel like you think they're crappy and not the thing that they wrote was just not your favorite thing right now. That's a balance, you know. You need to make sure that people aren't feeling attacked personally when you're giving them criticism about their work, you know, and being of the female persuasion, I know that I get all in my feelings sometimes, and when somebody's saying, this is a thing, and you go, but I love that thing that I was saying, and you have to, you know, let it go. So you have to let them give you permission to let it go.
Yeah, but it's similar to that. Just cultivate a practice of self-awareness, knowing what you need. If you're going to receive criticism that day, maybe you need your mantras on the wall. Maybe you need to be like, I am awesome as you go out the door. Maybe you need to meditate and witness your sensations and feelings. Wherever you need to get yourself to be able to receive information that is not necessarily about you personally. It's about creating the best work. And then you have to really check, and this is where it gets very tricky, because first of all, also cultivate friends who will tell you things honestly. I don't know if we practice that enough. Because how often do you tell someone something truthfully with love, and how hard that is, but especially in this industry when there's a lot of bullshit, and a lot of people just making you want to feel good in the moment, find the people who will tell you if your shit stinks, right? That's okay. It's not you who stinks, it's that product could be better. And I said it to say, meanwhile, you do have to check the positionality of where this, the criticism is coming from, but don't let that usurp gems. If it's coming from, if I'm as a black, queer, cisgender female and I'm giving something to a white, cis male, I'm gonna understand the positionality that he's giving his position from, but I am not gonna throw it out all right away. I might throw it out after I've had my emotional reaction of being hurt, I'm so sorry to say that, of being hurt. That was inappropriate, of being, and wrong, I'm so sorry, of being hurt or sensitive, right? But I'll throw it out after I've actually heard it. You know what I mean? So because he could be saying something really great that's just couched in my reactions of like, he doesn't understand my position as a black woman in this country, in this white, from society, like, right? Those are really valid reactions, and sometimes there's a gem coming from that direction. So I am just selfish to create the best work. So I will put my ego on the side by my meditation practice and be like, okay, let me hear this again. And I repeat back, am I hearing this? I'll check for understanding, did I hear this correctly? And then I'll sit on it, I'll wait for my emotions to like have their thing, maybe the next day, look at my little things on the wall, you're amazing! Call my wife, you're amazing! And then be like, oh, okay, now do I take it or do I throw it out? But I don't throw it out right away. Don't throw it out right away.
I love how you're just piggyback off.
I was
the entire time.
like, and
Because I think the really practical thing to do is to remember that not all criticism needs to be solved for right away. In fact, I would say as soon as you get criticism, sit on it for a while. The important thing to do is make sure you understand the criticism so that then you can actually parse what is useful and what is not useful. Because not all criticism is beneficial to what you're trying to do. Right. So don't ever really feel like you have to solve for all levels of criticism. Make sure you know what the criticism actually is and understand it from all angles. Choose what is beneficial and not. And if you're having a problem with that, I would say it's important to always keep your goal in mind. So knowing what your purpose was, the reason why you started telling the story in the first place, depending on what the criticism is it useful to that goal or is it not? So that's like a more practical, very Capricorn, very corporate way of dealing with criticism. Anybody have any questions on that? On this in particular? All right, so I have a question now. Do you want to, you can ask it right now if you like.
Okay, I will do that. When writing, I suffer a lot from second guessing, especially under pressure. I feel mostly like it's something right at the dead end, and like I should go with something completely different all of a sudden in the last minute. And so what I would like to ask is there a way that any of you have found when writing to decipher between when something isn't working because you're reconnecting to your piece or because something deeper is wrong with the piece, or when it's just self-sabotage or something that's going on with your anxiety separately? Like, is there a way to decipher between those two things?
self-talk. I mean, I do a lot of self-talk. It's, you were doing that, is it this? And I'm like, yeah, I do that a lot. I was like, but ask yourself questions. Like really, like, you know, don't shy away from the idea. I mean, I've thrown whole pieces out, literally 30 hours before I was supposed to turn something into my editor. I was like, well, this was actually crap. But what I do know is when I've done that, and then I just write, it like comes out like this. So sometimes it's okay that you throw out the whole thing and start again because you got rid of all the crappy ideas in the one thing, and then this like beautiful piece like comes flowing out of you without any like worry, and you know it's right because it feels like you literally feel like you release something. So I'd say it's definitely self-talk is a really great thing, except it needs to be kind and loving, and I know I keep giving the hippie answers, but the kind, loving, trust yourself, like trust that you know that you're a writer, and it goes back into that, I'm a writer, like sometimes you have to look at yourself in the mirror and go, you're a fucking writer, man. Do the thing, and like believe, because if you're not believing in yourself, nobody goes, the authenticity answer goes back. Nobody's gonna believe what you just wrote. Nobody's gonna believe that you believed it when you wrote it, so they're not gonna listen. So definitely do the self-talk kindly.
That's really great. It sounds like to me too that you're answering some of your own questions, like going along, because even in your question, I think you were answering it. So I think you need to trust yourself. I mean, even if just put blatantly a sign up on the wall above where you're writing, I don't know if you're writing a script or a novel, this is your script. Like, I've written, this is your script, Julie, this is yours. So I feel like you need to trust yourself, because I think you're answering a lot of your own questions. And that goes with the self-talk too. And then also people with whom you have a strong relationship even outside of the industry. I think some of the best, if you're really uncertain, I give my mom a lot of my writing, and she's not a writer, not an actor, and I get some awesome feedback. So, if there's somebody with whom you have a really trusting relationship, that could be helpful too.
But why are you second guessing yourself? I mean, in the writing process, you're like, you get lost.
I think I have creative ADD, where I tend to just jump between projects a lot, and then I get very passionate about a project, and then I suddenly am like, or should it be this other thing though? That's the ticket, like that's what I should put all my focus into, and now last minute, again, it's usually deadline. If someone's like, oh, bring a pitch of, your best one thing, and then I'm like, what's the best one thing? And then that goes and spirals into this whole.
I would just go with your gut feeling and then just start writing. What I do, I'm old school, so I write and then I print it and I look and then I cut stuff. I go, well, I said that here, so I scratch it and then I go, this was good. So I circle it and then I read it, reread it, and I'm like, what are you trying to say? That's the one question I always tell myself. And then the second one is keep it simple. Keep it simple. Why do all those words and what are you saying? What's your point? And keep it simple. And I think that's what we try to do. How are you? And not second guess, just go with your gut instinct. And then, this is the story. You want to tell a story about this, write it, then that helps if you print it and read it, and then you can write on it. It does for me. I'm not a computer person, but everybody finds their own way to argue. Yeah. I never knew I had that kind of
Let's get really quickly into the creative industry so that we can answer at least one of these questions, and let me pick the one that I think is the better one. Does anybody have any questions that they've been holding on to just yet?
I've got a question. So going back to some of the beginning, we talked about how you are helping someone relate to an experience that they might not otherwise be having. So we're big fans of One Day at a Time, for instance. There's Mom, the daughter comes out, there's a fun grandma, like all of these things about our lives that resonate, but we're not Latinx. So that's been fascinating to see that aspect. I'm curious if you have some examples of where you have used the storytelling to help someone relate to a experience and learn more about that experience, because One Day at a Time, for instance, has really done that for us.
Yeah, I can talk about, so I was doing the PR for the Diane Shore weekend for 10 years. And the way that I pitched it, because it was always known as the lesbian spring break. And I thought, okay, well, for me also, to challenge myself, I really wanted to get mainstream media to cover the event. And so I thought, okay, what is really the gem about the event? It's not so much, the lesbian spring break, we all know that. We all go, we do the pool parties, get drunk, maybe hook up if you're single, I don't know, whatever. But that's not, I was never in denial that that's what the event is known for. But I thought, okay, to sell it to mainstream, what are we talking about? And it was really about the women empowerment, the community building, the whole feeling that you get when you leave the event, where you're really, I mean, even me, I was working it, but I felt so empowered every time I was leaving, because to see that there's so many women who, for 5 days or 3 days, whatever time you spend at the event, just show up. You don't care, how you look, how much money you make, what you drive, who you are. Nobody cares. It's really about connecting. And so, I mean, I'll brag, but we got, so much media coverage, like Forbes did a story, LA Magazine, LA Weekly, LA Times, calendar section, front page cover. I mean, it was just insane. I'm very proud of the work that I did, but I told a story that I guess even straight women could relate to. And over the years, I mean, it's still very much gay, not lesbian event, but we've had gay guys showing up. We've had even straight women showing up. So yeah, straight, see? So it's really about finding, I always say, finding the gem in the story that's gonna help other people really relate to it. At this point, nobody cares if you're gay or not. You just want, you're selling the experience. That's what it, at least for me, that's what it was.
I'm usually, I sit on a lot of boards, right? So I'm often like the professional lesbian in the room because everybody else isn't one. So I kind of have to speak for the whole community. And I'll make gay jokes all the time. Like I make jokes about us, and I'll be like, well, it's kind of gay. And then they'll be like, I don't even know what that means. So part of it is understanding who your people are, and then being able to not. We kind of take ourselves really seriously sometimes. Like, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be taking ourselves seriously. I'm saying like sometimes we get a little heavy for people who don't know anything, And so if someone is a complete neophyte when it comes to anything as a queer experience, them not understanding what you're talking about is not necessarily their fault. It's this amazing teaching moment that you can go, oh, let me explain to you what this means. So then they go, oh wait, I think my receptionist is lesbian, like all of a sudden they start doing, I had a friend when I came after her was like, I don't know any gay people. I was like, yes you do. She thought I was the only one. I'm like, let's be clear, you work in fashion. I promise you know gay people. And she's like, well, I love gay boys. And I was like, no, you know lots of lesbians, you just don't realize it. And then after I'm saying things, then she went, oh yeah, oh, that's what, like there's all of this aha happening, And when you're doing it, it's this great experience when you see someone getting it, because all of a sudden their like world opens up even more, So you're like opening people's doors just like a little bit wider and a little bit more. And I'm certain that part of the reason my father didn't have as much of an issue with lesbians was he's a golfer. So he had all of these lesbians he used to work with all the time. So like, I kind of put it all together for him. So sometimes you're like just connecting dots for people that didn't really understand what they didn't understand until a little bit later. So
I think it's about making the experience universal, so that way people can connect and relate without necessarily being gay or.
Yeah, also I think having an honest conversation with yourself as an artist, maybe even, I have to sometimes with the 2 period pieces I'm working on, both are with 2 different marginalized groups that I'm not a part of. And so I have to have an honest conversation with myself on what do I know, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a white girl from Ohio, so I've had to step outside my boundaries and think about, instead of me preaching to other people, what do I know? What do I need to learn? And it's been humbling, because, I call myself a progressive. And I realize, do I really even know some of the things I'm saying? Do I really even understand, some of the conversations about, politically and artistically, about race, gender, all of that? Like, I've had to have a few honest conversations. And sometimes that's difficult when when you're like, oh, I'm not very liberal and progressive, but in storytelling, that can be a hard talk, and it's a good one, because at the end of the day, if you're learning something, so is your audience. So it's truthful at that point.
I have a question.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. You have a question.
Practically answered my question already.
We meant to do that.
They're so bad. They're pros. In your opinion, what is the most impressive way storytelling has adapted in the last 10 to 20 years?
Access?
Yes.
It is, it's access, that's it. With everything becoming so digital, I mean, to some extent, a lot of typical problems from development up to post-production have almost been made easy. I mean, the story part's not easy. That will always be difficult. But access and then just the ability, I mean, you can create an amazing pitch deck and almost tell this with art. And, oh, my other favorite thing, mixing media. You can blend art and a film and with theater, and it's changing in ways that there's so much to play with. I mean, there's so much opportunity in it.
Like how to tell the story, like the mediums that are available to you.
Oh my gosh! Again, access to digital streaming. Like it's easy to get your show out there too. Again, that doesn't make the show good. I think there's a plenty of content out there, but yeah, just the digital form of streaming.
YouTube is everything. Yeah, YouTube. I feel like YouTube changed kind of everything.
Yeah.
Just because it's like digital public access. Like it used to be you could just pay for your 30 minutes and tell your story, and maybe somebody heard you because they were randomly watching television at that time. Right, exactly. But YouTube, I mean, look, was it Justin Bieber discovered on YouTube? I mean, yes. I mean, so I felt like YouTube was kind of like a massive game changer as far as just being able to say, this is me, I am my thing, and you getting to say it the way you wanted to say it, even if nobody else was listening. Eventually people find you.
Yeah.
I think I know. Who has time to look at all this stuff? Yeah, you said it was access. It's
Access, media, and then I will add that I think that in terms of the craft in each of the different disciplines, what I've noticed is a lot of, we're removing a lot of the rigidity and formality and the formal structures of how you're supposed to do this thing.
Yeah.
How you're supposed to write a novel, how you're supposed to film your movie, how you're supposed to write your play. We're removing a lot of that old thinking about this is how you do it, and we've seen a lot of people just get very, very creative about switching up acts or things like that. I think it has to do with the access, I think it has to do with multimedia. And you're really at liberty to write a novel in a way that people tell you when you learn about writing novels in school, not doing it that way.
Right.
Doing it in a way that suits your purposes, that is for your audience, and even if it's niche, I think the access actually helps that niche audience get something that resonates with them and the way that they want to hear it. And I think we still have a lot of rigidity, I think you'll find in a lot of the industries, but I do think that each one has been blown up in one way, and I think they're further going to get blown up. And I think that's one of those things that has changed in the last 10 to 20 years, where it's kind of like a new renaissance in a way. Because that's always what happens in a renaissance, is where you have somebody doing something really alternatively, and then all of the stuffed shirts are saying, no, that is not how we do it.
Right.
I mean, if you've been watching it's the Emmys or the Grammys or the Oscars or something, and there's controversy because they don't want to include Netflix in one of the award shows because it's not technically film.
Right.
And there's a lot of conversation about, well, is what Netflix doing, is it considered film for this award show? So all of that, we're having conversations about it, and I think that is a really good example of how things are changing and how they're going to continue to change.
Exactly. Roma would not have been seen if that was just a four-wall, basically released in a theater, which is four-walling something. Had that not been on Netflix, I don't think people would have watched Roma. I mean, it's a beauty. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing. But there's not big names in it. So without that, I don't know how many would have won Best Director. it's lovely that you call it a renaissance. I call it the Wild Wild West. You have a much better positive.
That is rare, I'm not usually the optimist. I'm either the cynical or the realist, I'm like, never gonna happen.
Yeah, I call it the Wild Wild West.
The thing is, I mean, but it's in everything, because we're talking about storytelling, right? So, E.E. Cummings, not capitalizing anything, you know? I mean, like, you can, every time, you can go back anywhere, and you will see someone who just like said, fuck that, I'm not doing that. But they did it with a knowledge of the rules. Okay, so here's my deal. If you want to be extraordinarily amazing and blow everybody's mind about your creativity and the oh my godness, know what the rules are before you break them. Because if you're just kind of doing it, I'm just doing it my way and I don't really care about that other shit, people are going to know that you don't care and they're not going to know you don't have skill because you're just making shit up now.
Yeah.
So like,
You think you're being creative.
yeah, right. It's like, not really. So know what the rules are, because there are some rules that are there because the only way people are going to know what you're talking about is because of that rule. And then there are other rules you can literally throw out the door because it was just some made-up thing.
But don't throw out pacing or timing.
No,
Or the dance
it's still necessary. It's still everything, absolutely.
Yeah.
The jewel that she drops.
And I think this is, depending on your answers, this could be the last question. How do you think the craft of storytelling will change in the future? And if you don't know exactly how, say what you'd like to see change.
Well, I think, before I answer it, I think the realization that it's always going to be a blend of art and commerce. And those two worlds sometimes really bump heads. Art is fluid and it's free thinking, but you still do have commerce. You still have to deal with either the monetization of something or how the distribution will be affected. And I think that's going to continue to change. Obviously, we're at a convention. We need conventions like this because diversity is an issue in storytelling. I mean, we're all here basically for that purpose. So my hope is that path continues. I mean, there's union rules that are finally now being, recognized, and there's a lot of, names out there that are starting to put clauses in, their pre-production deals that they want a certain amount of diversity. I forget one of the Frances Jordan, I believe.
Yeah,
she has a clause where there has to be a certain level of diversity in crew and I believe in the cast. And so I think keeping that path and being very aware about it and being very educated in how it's presented will keep that momentum going and keep that voice going. Hollywood still is an old boys club to some degree, especially female directors. And it's starting to change because the conversation is very well educated and it's happening. So.
For me, in my field, it's mostly about the medium. So we have social media, and certainly, reporters are getting lazy. And so basically, what's happening on my end is mostly you're selling an experience or a lifestyle, and so it's becoming more and more visual. And so you can look at if you follow certain restaurants or a club that works online. On Instagram, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and so they're selling the experience with one photo. So I'm not saying my job is becoming irrelevant, but kind of a little bit. And so I think for me, it's mostly about the medium and how you're telling the story, how you're conveying basically the experience or lifestyle that you sell. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. If you're looking I also do the PR for ClexaCon, so there's a lot of things that they're doing visually, creating videos and just to show people who have no idea what the convention is about. I think that will sell it more than a story. Because reporters can be lazy, but so are we. We don't read.
Is anybody Facebook living this right now? I was just wondering.
No, but you don't have a lot of people reading stories anymore in terms of articles and things like that. So more and more we're doing it visual and finding a way way to tell the story in a very short, concise way, but also enticing, because you want people to think and people want to join you.
As someone who gets her press releases, the deal is you still have to make people care to pay attention. So you're not, just FYI, like you still have to be there to go, this is really important, pay attention now. But it's about empowerment. For me, everything started, like all the political stuff started going in my head, and I was like, and so what I'm seeing is things like this happening where we're all getting together and going, yeah, we're fucking awesome! And then going out and using that as a thing to be like a da-da-da-da! And so you have to keep connected to that, like that's what's gonna, I think, grow the voices in the industry. The reason that somebody like Frances McDormand putting that in her, and then getting up and receiving Oscars and saying, this is bullshit, okay? And they go, quick, shut it off. But it's already been said now, so, and backing it up, So if people are opening the door for you, put your foot in it. Do the thing. If somebody is doing it, put your foot in the door and go, no, and be seen, and what's that, speak your truth, even if your voice shakes, do it, your voices are so important. What did Lena Waithe say? Your queerness is your superpower, so use that shit, man, you have a voice that no one else has because there is only one you, so no one else can tell the story the way you can. Nobody else can say the thing that you do because there is only one you, so that's the only way it works, right? You're here, and each person that has a story to tell is here to tell that story. So if you don't do it, it's not going to get told. So I'm excited at what's coming, The millennials invented a thing that I didn't even know. I was like, what is this? I need interns to teach me my phone all the time. A new thing happened, and then they changed the app, and so it's moving at like a blink of an eye.
You should marry someone younger.
Yeah, I know, right? It's helpful, yes. Yes, I think I need to adopt someone. I'm adopting children. But so I'm excited for what's coming because I feel like if they keep coming together, the voices that get out there, and
Yeah, I kind of wish we ended on that one because I'm excited. I have an excitement and a fear, or a curiosity, I should say, because I'm excited as well. The access is just exploding, and I was talking to my wife yesterday about seeing some of the films, and I was like, we just saw 4 different themes in web series that I have never seen on mainstream TV. 4 different moments of a relationship, and I was like, oh my god, I want more. And on mainstream, I see 10 things of the same thing all the time. So I am so excited because I do think that this avalanche will not stop. Even it's going to be slow and up and down, but the access and the stories that I'm going to see and reflections of myself and my experience that I'm going to see, it's just going to be amazing. I am curious about how humans will evolve with our attention span, because I feel like it's getting shorter and shorter, and I'm of a generation that maybe was on, we're straddling longer attention spans and short, I think I'm straddling that middle of grew up with having to have longer ones, and now I have the privilege and the luxury of having to have a very short one. And so I'm also a theater-born actor. I'm in storytelling from the original theater, right? So but the attention span, we're going to require more and more flash and visual, and we're going to require more stimulus to get our attention as we keep going on this trajectory. And that makes me just curious what will happen to, because I'm a big old school structured person of story. I'm curious what will happen to story when my attention span requires that it be quicker, faster, bolder. And I crave and I live on nuance and the time it takes to cultivate that tenderness of a moment. But then again, I saw a 6-minute short the other day that had me at 30 seconds. Right. But it still needed but I still wanted the full 2-hour story. So I don't know, I'm just gonna be curious what happens to our attention spans as our technology, beautifully so, but catapults us into needing constant stimulation at a very high level. And we get trained and addicted to that. Well, I'm curious what's gonna happen to how we write stories, and I like sitting in front of a movie for 2 hours, you know? I like that, so we're gonna be interested.
That's a panel for next year, y'all. Thank you for coming. Really, we're out of time.
No. Panel for next year. That's our panel.
That's it. And that was all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.